We'll move on to Councilmember Harrington.
Okay. Well, I have appointed Kelso to the Planning Commission twice now, so I'm very familiar with his qualifications. But obviously I don't know your position on all matters. So with regard, I will ask the marijuana question. With regard to the idea of having multiple marijuana dispensaries, right now the idea is two. Do you think that would be good for the town? Without taking a position on it, that would disqualify you from voting later. What are your thoughts about that? Or what are your thoughts about the development of marijuana businesses in the town of Sonoma?
Well, well, first I'll say I've had a personal evolution on this issue. If you asked me this 10 years ago, I would not have supported that. You know, I did go to Berkeley, but this may shock everybody, I wasn't a huge partaker of cannabis at Cal. And so I wasn't really familiar with the issue. And then people close to me got sick, and I saw how cannabis, especially in a medical fashion, really helps people. And it really opened my mind on that. And so for a long time now, I've supported a medical dispensary in Sonoma. And then when the voters of California legalized recreational cannabis, this is now a legal product in California. And so if you're asking me if I support a second dispensary in California or in Sonoma, I would, but I would qualify that by saying, I believe the city council has always supported a second dispensary in Sonoma. When you started this process, you wanted to open up a storefront and then a delivery only dispensary. And so from day one, I believe the city council always believed in competition to providing two separate dispensaries. Now through the process and learning just more, as I mean, everyone learns through any sort of process they engage in, they learned that maybe the economics didn't work in a small town with just a delivery only. And so if you're asking me if I believe there should be two storefronts, as someone who generally supports the free market, I have no issue with that. What I would say is I would like to look at the process, because just as we learned through that process that a delivery only dispensary might not be economically feasible, the financial backing that you needed to qualify, which is understandable. If we were going to start off with one dispensary, I think the city council wanted to make sure it was a success, and we also wanted to prove to the city of Sonoma that this wasn't going to be a controversial business. It was important to look at their financial backing to make sure this made sense. But moving forward, for our second dispensary, I do think we should be open to looking for ways for small business entrepreneurs from our city or from the Sonoma Valley to be able to participate. And I believe the initial process really blocked that and really sort of lended itself to larger groups with more significant backing. And if there's a way we could tweak the process to make opportunities available for local small business owners, people that grew up in Sonoma, I would really want to look at something like that.
But I'll ask you the same question I asked Kelso Barnett, which is, the city has recently approved one marijuana dispensary, and we are going to consider approving a second or changing our ordinance to allow for a second without tying yourself down to an answer that wouldn't allow you to consider information you would get at a public hearing. What are your thoughts about that?
You know, I think it's a great idea because it's economic diversification, right? And so when one of the biggest things we're looking at is the downturn of the hotel tax. It's essentially $2 million, right? Is usually 20 million. We bring in 18. And so how do we make up that $2 million difference? And so the first aspect is, the first thing I think of is only 10% decline based on hotel occupancy is remarkable. Our economy is already fairly diverse and will continue to get there. But leveraging our agricultural resources will help diversify our economy. So if you have a second retail dispensary, that will help with some of the tax revenue that you wouldn't otherwise have. I think the optics of it, the perspective of it is that we have a tiny town, and so two dispensaries is already, that's saturation almost. Like that's plenty. I mean, that does provide competition, which you want, but at the same time, there is competition in Cotati and Napa and other dispensaries around. So I think it's very valuable to have that because I think it provides tax revenue as well as a little bit of a shelter for the economic downturn. So I'm in complete support of a second dispensary, although I don't think we should go that much more as far as the retail aspect is concerned. That being said, I just thinking out loud, and if we were on the council, we would all think out loud together, is that is like how much demand is there for a third or fourth or fifth? I don't think there's that much. It's a small town. And so I think it's a great idea to have a second. I think it's a little bit of an economic shelter for us.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sandra, for being here. And so I'm going to ask you the same question I asked before, which is the city council has recently approved one marijuana dispensary, and we're considering amending our ordinance to allow for a second one, and without making any Brown Act violations or, disqualifying yourself from a future vote. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I have no problem with a second a dispensary. I think that the market will bear out. If people all of a sudden say, I'll go to one, or, they're both crowded and need three. I mean, we have 10 pizza places at least that I know of. And, people still love pizza and they go there. And, some days I feel like Red Grape and some days I feel like Mary's. And, I think people are allowed to make those decisions. I'm not just in a more general description of how I think. If something is a legal operation and they present something, I think it's up to the people in Sonoma to tell us, yeah, I think it's a good thing, and that's what I'm hearing, and so I'm fully supportive, and I hope that some of the people that didn't make it through the first round will make it through this time, and we'll have a second dispensary, and when my mom comes, we can go to both.
My first question is about cannabis. So as I said before, we recently approved one dispensary, and we are considering amending our ordinance to allow for two. And what are your thoughts about that without committing yourself to an answer that would preclude you from participating in the future if you are selected as a council member?
My answer, I won't commit myself. My answer is very, very clear. Get on with it. Make a decision. Make a decision, right or wrong, make a decision, and let's move ahead. We can change our mind later at some point. Be smart about it, but it's time to make the decision.
Do you have any comment about how you would decide?
All right, here comes not a member of any political party, but with a very strong libertarian streak. I believe that people tend to make really good decisions if left alone. And markets which have a very bad name, in certain political circles, really work, as polling for what's, what should or should not be. I don't know why, frankly, that we're that we're so deep into this question, as opposed to deciding. And Mayor Harvey, you've heard me say this before, but why aren't we deciding how many pharmacies we have in town, how many lawyers' offices we have in town? Excuse me, Attorney Walter. But
just like one or two probate attorneys
or pizza parlors, as Susan said earlier. We're trying to fine tune this too much, and I would encourage whether I'm there or not, I would encourage you to make a decision, get it done. And if you do,
okay,
you do appoint me, you'll hear that from me again.
And next up, we have Councilmember Amy Harrington.
Hi, Mr. Paget. So my first question is the same as what I've asked everyone else. We've recently approved one marijuana dispensary and we are considering approving a second one. What are your thoughts about that matter?
I don't have a problem with it. Where I am currently living is a retirement age mobile home park. They all use, they have to get it somewhere. We might as well keep the tax dollar here in town. I don't have a problem with that at all.